He is award-winning author of urban fantasy thrillers, Spectre of the Intention, Faces in the Water. A resident of Hillsboro, Oregon, Tonya lives with her husband, children's author Tonya Macalino, and their 2 wildly imaginative kids. And I have met them, and she's right. She is an avid collector of folklore and folk history, far too many to fit comfortably within the pages of any given book. When not working on her latest thriller, she enjoys coaching other writers through the How to Build a Book workshops at Jacobson's Books and more. Tonya also acts as vice president of NIWA, the Northwest Independent Writers Association. Tonya, please come up and tell us about your book.
Then there's a short. There we go. Okay, can you hear me? I have the world's tiniest voice, sorry. So I did not prepare an amazing spiel. Public speaking is absolutely not my gig. So what I've got here is some little clips from the book. I wrote Faces in the Water. It's set in Venice, and I'm going to give you a little introduction from the preface. All right. Perhaps it's happened once to you. Perhaps you sat amongst the stones in solitude and felt something. A wavering sense of the ancient, a feeling that something significant had happened right here where you were sitting. What if, as you were lost in that feeling, a spry old woman invited herself to sit down beside you? What if she leaned in and whispered, "Once upon a time"? Right where you were sitting, a youth lifted up his bow and his quiver and set off to become a man. And suddenly you no longer sat in a tumble of stones, but in a vibrant, living place where the soil and the forgotten foundations remembered their stories to you in resonant voices. Just sitting, absorbing those stories, brought your soul to life in ways you hadn't felt in years, in ways that would stay in your memory for always. This is the way that Elise explores the ruins of Venice. You won't be able to use her tale to map a tour of the ancient lagoon city, but as Elise weaves her own myth, Venice and her stones will share their endless legend with you as well. So I can very much identify with Ken back there. I am a folk history freak, and that's what I bring to my urban fantasy thrillers. So Elise is a sensory immersion artist. She does the sensory tracks for holographic films. This is near future technology. And she uses, so if there's something that you think would be this amazing thrill that you don't want to risk breaking your own neck, well, she goes and risks breaking her neck, records it on a little computer in her brain, and then you can hook up to a computer and try it yourself without actually dying. So that's kind of, she's not the most cautious person. But anyway, so the computer in her head she calls Mo, and we're gonna meet Venice for the first time. She is on a train on the way into Venice, and she has a problem. It's called touch sensitivity. It hurts her to make physical contact with other people, but except for this one guy who happens to be her arch nemesis. All right. Bryce took over the armrest, leaned in close to point out the window. We're headed to Padua. I nodded, trying to remember I cared. I followed his gesture to look out the window. To do any different would have brought my face far too near his. You haven't started your research, have you? He murmured. Been busy? Mom's in town. So I heard. At least I know I'm the wrong one to say this, but that was a damn stupid thing to do. You're right, you're the wrong one. It doesn't mean I don't care what happens to you. His breath pressed hot against my neck. My brain threatened to abandon me to fate. I felt his intention even before he moved. Don't. He reached out. He spread his long fingers across my inner wrist. He wrapped his hand around my now naked forearm. My heart slammed against my chest. Fiercely ignoring the hormones buzzing in my ears, I shook him off. So, what's the story with Padua? Well, it's the beginning of the story, Elise. The city, founded by Antenor, the traitor, when he fled Troy with his followers, the Veneti. Veneti, mythical ancestors of the Venetians, Mo supplied. Thanks, Mo. So I turned to him. It seems to me that Antenor's treachery depends on your source. Can you really blame him for being a Greek sympathizer who wants to lose their sons and daughters over an adulteress? Ah, but he opened Troy for the slaughter. Dante named a level of hell reserved for traitors after him. I arched an eyebrow at him. In the original stories, he was the wise counselor. It's only later he gets set up as the one who opens the horse for the Greeks, the terrible traitor whose house is spared by the mark of the panther skin. Not really a very likely scenario. You know, when a city like that burns, the whole thing burns. Having a panther skin on your door is not going to do a damn thing. Bryce's smile was slow and sly. You want the story or not? I shot him a glare promising physical damage. He just chuckled at me. What good did it do, I had to wonder, to have the stigma of being intimidating if you could never use it when you needed it? All right. This legendary Trojan and his refugees founded Pavantium in 1183 BC. More than 2,000 years later, the people of Padua found his remains in a triple sarcophagus. One of marble, one of lead, and one of cypress. Ecstatic to have their mythical origins confirmed, they moved the sarcophagus to a grand church to honor it. Then in the mid-1300s, they reopened the coffin, and the ruler of Padua took the proud warrior's sword for himself. As if in payment for that slight, Antenor began to slowly withdraw his mythic splendor from the city. First, the church was demolished, leaving the sarcophagus and its housing standing alone on a street corner. Then the scientists got hold of the skeleton and turned great Antenor into the nameless barbarian warrior, born centuries too late to have inspired Homer. Well, science always did know how to ruin a good myth. Bryce straightened with a laugh. I thought you would enjoy that one. Somehow I had ended up facing him, smiling and easy. I didn't even see it coming. He reached up and stroked a hand down my cheek, those vivid, glittering eyes fixed on mine. Take care of yourself, Elise. None of us wants to lose you. All right, so they make it to Venice. They're there to do a documentary about the flooded ruins. They're using it as a quarantine camp, but they want, the people who are living there want it documented. And kind of the old stories, the old legends, what was there before it all kind of got ripped to pieces by looters and archaeologists. So they're there to bid on the project. And despite several people saying, stop, go no further, she goes further, and ends up in the hospital. So this is my little thing that I like to do. In my books, I like to take the mythology of one place and kind of contrast it with the mythology of another place. And so this is where you meet where she's from. She's from Kalispell, Montana, which is kind of a pretty good contrast between, you know, your more misty, ethereal, traditional style like mythologies and your, you know, earthy pioneer folklore. So here you are going to meet the beginnings of Kalispell, Montana. So she's just coming to from going under at the hospital. For hours I fought for consciousness through a thick haze of drugs. Each time I grasped it, a fleeting thought distracted me, slid me back under. Now once more I seized at a crack in the chemical barricade. This time my desperate grip held. I felt the cool breeze of reality on my face. I snapped my eyes open, trying to lock in my return. The moving air burned my eyes as I stared at the scarred ceiling. I forced myself to trace the patterns of battered beams left behind by archaeologists and looters. I traced them over and over and over. Just holding on, nothing more. Minutes passed. I dared release a little tension from my body, let my gaze wander in a little wider sweep, still wary of distraction, just focusing on the chipped pattern of the moldings. That's when I saw him. In a blackened corner of the ceiling, he gazed down on me beatifically, a bulbous baby, naked save for a pair of tiny feathered wings, both whimsical and grotesque in his burnt-out patch of painted sky. He's mine, you know. I saw him first, I did. Startled as I was, my body was too heavy to react. Instead, I turned my eyes and saw the nurse, Maeve, sitting in a chair beside me. Oh, when Venice finally died, the folks who were left took everything with them they could. Paintings, wood paneling, marble, all of it had more value to him over there in those souvenir markets than left here for the sea to destroy. And then the looters came, chipped away everything else. Like grave robbers they were, stripped the corpse down to the bones. Sometimes they even took the bones themselves. But they missed my little pootie, left him to watch over us, I'd like to think. Lord knows we need watching over. I turned my eyes back to the little orphaned infant. I had awoken fighting and angry. Now desolation joined the weight on my unresponsive body. Left behind, in the most beautiful city in the world, in the emptiness, someone had been left behind. Someone had been here in the end, had made the choice to leave. How must it have been? How must it have been to have had the responsibility for the stories, for the lives of all of your forefathers, and then one day realize that living had to take precedence over remembering? You had to leave, knowing you had abandoned all of this to die a solitary death, or die with it yourself. The choice gets forgotten, then the emptiness gets erased, until it's hard to imagine. Back home, I remembered a black and white photo, a patch of foundations. Demersville, Kalispell's great rival. Demersville had been somebody's bright dream, and then it was gone. Lost to a little change in the path of the coming railroad. Its people, they put wheels on their businesses and their houses, dragged them across the plain, a great creaking convoy. They set down new roots in Kalispell, went on with their lives. Most of them, anyway. But Demersville was a brash young man. Venice was a grand dame. Left behind, the sea dragging at her heavy skirts. Only a matter of time. I felt myself slipping again. The exhaustion swept forward, and I fought back at it half-heartedly. Sleep if you need to. I'll be here. I won't let you wake up alone. So there's Kalispell. And I'm going to keep this short, but I have a little closing paragraph. Slowly my mind lost its thoughts of vengeance and became a whirl of the impossible. A dark prince in his castle, luring, coaxing, a defeated knight straining against invisible prison walls. A white-haired guide, running through the woods, always just disappearing from view. A crafty water sprite, stealing possessions, leaving bits of food in their stead. A fae of light and shadow with her dangerous, fickle wit. The night's relentless hunters slathering in the shadows, a sea king with the power over life and death. And a pair of steadfast brothers whose love and loyalty tried to save me. And through it all, Venice, her aging stones and murky depths, giving life to the dark-hearted wonder, the tempting horror from which she was created, from legend. Oh yes, I also have a second book. This is The Spectre of Intention. That one's got more of a, it's set on a space elevator, so it's got more of a science fiction background to it.